Well, during this video, we're going to talk a little bit about China. I know China is a big place, a lot of complexity. I think the most important thing to know about China is just the size and the variety. It is by far the #1 food service market in Asia Pacific. It's almost reaching a $500 billion business. And I would say in the next 5 years, if you look at the entire Asia Pacific food service market, China will be close to 50%. So you really can't have a healthy business in Asia Pacific without being in China. And that's where the problem starts, because China is a very, very difficult market to enter and to compete. But just some highlights. Obviously, Chinese cuisine is pretty good, and Chinese are proud of their cuisine. So to some extent, it's a little bit like Italy, where Italians don't see any need for any other cuisine simply because their food is so good. But after Chinese cuisine, again, we can easily see that Japanese food is the second most preferred food, followed by Korean food. And Western food is a little bit of an anomaly in the full service segment, but obviously in the fast food segment, it's dominated historically by KFC and McDonald's. So a couple of other things to note is that KFC and McDonald's are now getting a lot of intense competition. China is an intensely competitive, intensely entrepreneurial place. And Chinese managers are extremely agile and adept at competing with international brands, especially in the restaurant business. They learn very, very quickly. So while KFC is the dominant chain, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see competitive Chinese fried chicken chains and also Chinese hamburger chains compete with McDonald's. For the moment, you're seeing lots of 400 to 500 unit Chinese fast food chains that are growing very rapidly. Many of them we work with, such as Dawan Dumplings, which has over 400 stores now and growing very, very rapidly. Zheng Kung Fu, which is kind of a Cantonese style fast food chain with over 400 stores. Ma Lang Noodles, Yonghe Dawang, which is essentially a bean curd Chinese donut chain. There are lots and lots of these chains emerging, and they're scaling up very rapidly, and there's no shortage of money because private equity money is coming into China. It's a #1 place for private equity, and that's where the money's going. And so if the concepts are good, there's plenty of private equity money available. So as I mentioned, intense competition. Now, where does that leave the American, European, or Japanese brands? Well, the problem is that there's not a lot of franchising in China. And so you really have to put your own equity into the game first to really establish a proven business model, and then it's a lot easier to attract partners throughout the country. And so just looking for master franchisee partners or partners to be area developers is extremely difficult and most likely to fail. Outside of KFC, McDonald's, and Pizza Hut, which were primarily developed by company-owned stores, Starbucks, the coffee segment, is doing very well. Starbucks is by far the dominant chain. It's going to 1,000 stores. Starbucks originally used overseas partners to develop the China market and bought them back. So now the China market is 100% owned by Starbucks. And outside of that, the really second-tier fast-growing concepts are Japanese. Yoshinoya is going to close in on 1,000 stores fairly quickly. They have very good partners. They have JVs, direct investments. But if you look at other American brands, very, very unsuccessful. European brands, not very successful. So the market is going to be dominated more and more by Japanese, Korean brands and Chinese brands, which are local. And the brands that are willing to invest money and develop still have a chance. However, the barrier to entry today is much higher than it was 10 years ago. And the reason is just the competitiveness, the amount of money you have to spend today to build a brand awareness and a presence is much higher than it was 10, 15 years ago. These brands such as KFC and Pizza Hut and McDonald's and Starbucks have such a head start. They have their own logistics centers, in many cases their own commissaries or central kitchens. So the investment today to compete is really exponentially higher than before. And therefore, I wouldn't be all that optimistic that new brands from overseas are going to penetrate the market. Most likely, it's going to be the agile, entrepreneurial local chains that succeed in the market. So in summary, biggest opportunity in Asia, almost a $500 billion market. It'll be 50% of the entire Asia Pacific industry, in the next 5 years. But the big question is, how do foreign brands compete